Welcome to this presentation on qualitative research design. Let's get started. So we'll begin by first discussing some of the key characteristics of qualitative research design. So when you're looking at your research problem and the research questions you're formulating, if exploring and investigating those questions lend to a qualitative design, these are some of the things that you're going to want to keep in mind. So qualitative research often begins with an open-ended approach to allow for the discovery of new insights and patterns as you're generating records and analyzing your data. You're going to continue to learn and gain new insights and see new patterns. And so this is the point of qualitative research. There's not really a hypothesis. You're learning as you go through the study. When we look at contextual understanding, qualitative research emphasizes understanding of phenomena within the social, cultural, and historical context from which it's happening, because these factors shape individuals' experiences and interactions. Qualitative researchers acknowledge the influence of their own perspectives and subjectivities and biases, and often engage in reflexivity to critically examine their role in shaping the research process and the outcomes. And then rather than aiming for large representative samples from which to generalize, qualitative research often involves selecting participants who can provide rich and diverse information relevant to the research questions. So a lot of times your sample will be small and purposive. As we look at an in-depth data collection or an in-depth process from which we're generating data, researchers spend a considerable amount of time with participants or in an environment observing, collecting detailed and nuanced data, often through open-ended interviews, observations, analyses of texts. And we'll look a little bit at that in some upcoming slides when we're looking at qualitative methods. And also the iterative and abductive process of analysis. Qualitative analysis, it can involve coding, categorizing, and interpreting data to identify patterns, themes, and relationships. This process is often iterative and abductive. As we said earlier, we're learning as we go, with researchers revisiting and refining their analysis as new insights emerge. There are several types of qualitative research designs based on different qualitative approaches, each with its own specific characteristics and purposes. In this image, here are some of the more common types that you'll probably hear more about moving forward. But again, there are many different types of qualitative research approaches, and depending on the approach that's used, will determine how the project is designed. So we'll start with phenomenological research. This design aims to understand the essence and the meaning of the human experience related to a particular phenomenon. Researchers explore participants' subjective experiences through in-depth interviews or observations to uncover the underlying structures and patterns of their lived experiences. And moving over to ethnographic research, ethnography involves studying and understanding the culture, beliefs, practices, and the social interactions of a group or of a community. Researchers immerse themselves in participants' natural environments for an extended period of time, often conducting participant observation, interviews, and document analysis to gain an in-depth understanding of culture. And next, we'll move over to grounded theory. Grounded theory is an approach where researchers aim to develop theories or conceptual frameworks grounded in the data. Through constant comparison and analysis of collected data, researchers identify categories, concepts, and relationships to generate a theory that explains the phenomenon under investigation. Next, we have case study research. Case study research involves an in-depth examination of a single individual, group, organization, or a specific context. Researchers collect multiple sources of data like interviews, observations, and documents to provide a comprehensive understanding of the case and to draw insights that may have broader implications. Next, we'll move down to narrative research. Narrative research focuses on understanding and analyzing the stories and personal narratives shared by individuals. Researchers examine the structure, the content, and the context of these narratives to gain insights and understandings into how individuals construct meaning and make sense of their experiences. Next, we have participatory action research. This type of research is a collaborative approach that involves researchers working closely with participants or communities to identify and address social issues or problems. The aim with this type of research is to empower participants and generate actionable knowledge through a cyclical process of reflection, action, and change. A lot of times, action research can also involve mixed methods, so quantitative and qualitative methods from which to carry out the study. Next, we'll look at constructivist and interpretive research. So this design emphasizes the importance of understanding multiple subjective realities and interpretations of social phenomena. Researchers explore the different meanings and perspectives attributed to a phenomenon, often using interviews or focus groups or textual analysis to uncover the complexities of individuals' interpretations. So as we've looked at different qualitative research designs based on the qualitative approaches a researcher might take to explore their questions, these are the methods in which they would use to generate records for their study and analyze those records to find the data they need to answer their questions. So we can start with observations. Researchers record what they see, what they hear, or encounter in a setting by observing participants' activities and behaviors. This can be done through written hand field notes, descriptive information of what's seen, what's heard. This can also be done with video through pictures and images. So there's a lot of different ways that observations can be utilized in order to gather records for data. Another one that people often think about when they think about qualitative research are interviews. There are multiple ways that an interview can be done. There can be one-on-one conversations where researchers ask open-ended questions to gain insights from participants. So not necessarily yes or no questions, but things that researchers can ask to elicit a deeper understanding. Interviews can be unstructured, where the interviewer adapts to the responses, or they can be structured where the interview asks the same questions to every participant. Focus groups can be thought of as another kind of interview, but you would use focus group interviews for very different things. Similar to interviews, but with multiple participants at once, focus groups usually include multiple participants. And so sometimes you might not get the straightforward information that you might be looking for when it comes to personal experiences. Sometimes the matter of groupthink. People might answer the way they think that you want to hear or answer according to what the group thinks. So there are multiple advantages and sometimes disadvantages to using focus groups. But focus groups are often used to explore group dynamics and collective views on a topic. We can also look at arts-based methods or visual methods. Arts-based methods include like visual art, photography, music, images, symbols, poetry, etc. There's a saying where sometimes it's actually called productive ambiguity. A scholar coined this term in talking about how sometimes words aren't enough to convey meaning. And so a lot of times people will they'll call on art or they'll create art from which to express themselves in ways that maybe words can't. These types of things can absolutely be used for collecting data or generating data for a study. You can also look at document, textual, or conversation analysis. Researchers gather data from written materials such as archives, annual reports, guidelines, policy documents, diaries, letters, maybe documents that are within an organization, so on and so forth. Surveys can also be used from which to gather qualitative data. The surveys look a lot different than they do in quantitative research. Usually with qualitative surveys, researchers distribute questionnaires with open-ended questions and don't necessarily use things based on a scale. You can also look at secondary research, where researchers collect existing data in the form of text, images, audio, or video recordings. The qualitative research design process typically involves several key steps, and here we're showing 9. While the specific details will vary depending on the research context and the methodology that you've chosen, here is a general overview of the steps involved. So step 1, identify your research question. Start by providing a concise and unambiguous statement that outlines your research question or objective. What do you want to explore or understand through your qualitative research? Ensure that your question is specific, focused, and relevant to your field of study. Step 2, determine the research approach. So once you have your research question, you'll select the most appropriate qualitative research approach or design based on that question and your objectives. Consider the different types of qualitative research designs that we just discussed, like ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, narrative, action research, case study, so on and so forth. Choose one that aligns with your research goals. Step 3, develop a research plan. Create a research plan that outlines the steps, procedures, and timeline for your study. Identify the target population or participants, data collection methods, and data analysis techniques you intend to use from which to answer your questions. Step 4, select participants. Determine the criteria for selecting your participants who can provide valuable insights related to your research questions. Consider factors such as demographics, expertise, experiences, or specific characteristics that are relevant to your study. Choose a sampling method, for example, purposive sampling or snowball sampling, to recruit your participants. Step 5, collecting data. Conduct data collection using the chosen qualitative methods. This may involve conducting interviews, observations, focus groups, or document analysis, as we just discussed in the previous slide. To maintain ethical standards, it is crucial to adhere to ethical guidelines and ensure that participants provide informed consent. Consider audio or video recording to ensure accurate data capture. Step 6, analyze your data. Engage in data analysis to identify patterns, themes, and insights from the collected data. This may involve coding, categorizing, and organizing the data using qualitative analysis, either by hand or using software or other manual techniques. Use iterative, abductive, and reflexive processes to refine and deepen your analysis. Step 7, interpret your findings. Interpret the findings based on the analysis of your data. Explore the emerging themes, relationships, and meanings that have emerged or that you've co-constructed from the data. Consider how the findings relate to your research question and the existing literature in your field. Step 8, draw conclusions and generate insights. Summarize your key findings of your study and draw conclusions based on your interpretation of the data. Reflect on the implications and the significance of your findings for theory, practice, or future research. Identify any limitations or potential bias in your study. Be transparent about your subjectivities. And step 9 is communicating your results. Prepare a report or a manuscript to communicate your research findings. Present your qualitative data, analysis, interpretations, and conclusions in a clear and organized manner. Consider sharing your findings through presentations, publications, or other appropriate dissemination channels. So we'll end the presentation by reviewing best practices to keep in mind while you are designing your qualitative research project. So first things first, clearly define your research questions. Make sure that your research questions and your objectives are specific, focused, and aligned with the purpose of your study. Clearly articulating your research questions and your objectives will guide your entire research design. Number 2, use a theoretical or conceptual framework. Situate your research within a relevant theoretical framework or an existing body of literature. This provides a foundation for understanding the context and helps you generate insights that contribute to theory development or refinement. Number 3, select an appropriate research design. So as we've already discussed different approaches and research designs, consider the different approaches that are available and then select one that aligns with your research goals. Number 4, use rigorous sampling techniques. Select participants or cases using rigorous sampling techniques. Consider purposeful sampling, where participants are chosen based on specific criteria relevant to your research question. Aim for diversity and seek saturation, where data collection reaches a point of redundancy and further data collection does not yield significant new insights. Number 5, establish trustworthiness and credibility. Enhance the trustworthiness of your research findings by employing strategies such as member checking, where participants review and validate your interpretations, or peer debriefing, where colleagues provide feedback on your analysis and interpretations. Triangulation, or the use of multiple data sources or methods, can also strengthen the credibility of your findings. Number 6, maintain reflexivity. Be aware of your own biases, assumptions, and preconceptions throughout the research process. Engage in reflexivity by regularly reflecting on how your own perspectives may influence data collection, analyses, and interpretation. Documenting and acknowledging your own role and potential impact on the research process is essential. Number 7, plan and conduct ethical research. Adhere to ethical guidelines and obtain informed consent from participants. Ensure participant confidentiality, anonymity, and privacy. Seek ethics approval from relevant institutional review boards or ethics committees. Number 8, use clear and consistent data collection methods. Follow established protocols and guidelines for data collection methods such as interviews, observations, or document analysis. Develop interview guides or observation protocols to ensure consistency and standardization across your participants or cases. Number 9, and this is really important, maintain detailed documentation. Keep comprehensive records of your research process, including field notes, transcripts, or analysis memos. Thorough documentation allows for transparency, traceability, and the potential for independent audit or replication of your study. Number 10, engage in iterative data analysis. Conduct data analysis iteratively throughout the research process. Use coding techniques, thematic analysis, or other appropriate qualitative research methods to identify patterns, themes, and relationships in your data. Allow for revisions, refinements, and further explanation of emerging insights, as you will be learning as you go through the process of generating data and analysis. Number 11 is to stay mindful of your subjectivities. Be mindful of your own biases as you go through the process. Strive to suspend your subjectivities by critically examining your interpretations, seeking alternative explanations, and engaging in peer debriefing or external review. And last but not least is communicate your findings effectively, as we've discussed. Clearly communicate your research findings, including your methodology, your data analysis, your interpretations, your limitations. Clearly outline every step that you've taken through your study and why you've made the choices that you have. Provide rich and detailed descriptions to support your arguments and your conclusions. And consider presenting your findings in ways that resonate with your intended audience, whether that be academic researchers, practitioners, your students, policymakers, so on and so forth.